I don't know how much context you have for this first reading we had from the second book of Maccabees. But what was going on is that Alexander the Great, who had conquered the known world at the time, he was on his deathbed and he divvied up his kingdom amongst his generals. And one of those kingdoms happened to be where the nation of Israel was. And a couple of generations go by, and there's a guy who rises up to power called Antiochus Epiphanes. And he's basically this terror on the Jewish nation because he wants them to do things like eat pork. Like it says even in the book of Maccabees that they cover over the mark of their circumcision. They're basically living like Greek people would. But in the midst of all of that turmoil and everything going on, there are people who rise up and say, we will not yield to this because our faith and the practices of it are so important to us. And so the first reading we had today, we heard of 3 of the 7 sons of this one woman who were all tortured and killed right in front of their mother, and as they kept going down the ranks through all of the brothers. And there's this really telling line that we heard from the 4th brother. We only heard from the 1st, 3rd, and 4th, so I know it's kind of confusing, but try to keep up. From the 4th brother, he said, "It's my choice to die at the hands of men, with the hope God gives of being raised up by him." So we have in here, in this story, already hope that resurrection is possible. That despite all the terrible things that are going on in the world and in our lives, there is hope that something better is to come. And for Christians, that's the resurrection. That's life after this life. I devote my time and energy to all sorts of things, and I will pretty foolishly give it up to all sorts of different things. I'll do all sorts of things that I probably shouldn't. Have you all ever played that game, What Are the Odds? I think y'all played that. We can do incredibly stupid stuff just because we guess the right number. How much are we willing to do for the sake of the resurrection? And so in the gospel reading today, we hear about these 7 brothers who all married the same woman, and at the end, all of them were dead. And so they're wondering, whose wife will she be at the resurrection? And Jesus is basically telling us that this story is pointless and that there is no point to all of that. Because what marriage is a living witness for this world of the power of the resurrection. Every good married couple is witnessing for the rest of the world of how Jesus loves his church. And what does that love look like? But a lot like that. A lot like the cross. You see, we're Christians and we have crucifixes in our churches and in our houses everywhere, not because we're morbid, not just because we're morbid, but because this sign has so much power. This was supposed to be a Roman torture device, and it very much was. They would have crosses along major highways so that people passing by, seeing people crucified on these crosses, would get the message very clearly that the Roman Empire is in charge, and if you do anything to cross them, this is what you get. And yet 2,000 years later, here we have crucifixes everywhere, and I think sometimes we might forget that reality, that this was supposed to be a terrible, terrible thing. But what it brought about, because of what Jesus did, is tremendous amounts of hope. That in even the most terrible of circumstances, there is hope that there can be resurrection. Even if 7 brothers and their mothers are tortured till death, even if Jesus died on the cross, that something better is to come. So you married couples, whenever you're suffering whatever torment or tribulation is going on, God bless you, and I hope you do it well, because you're, again, a living example of what it means that Christ loves his church. And thank you for being that witness. And for the rest of us, no matter what circumstances we're in, I hope we remember that there is hope in the power of the resurrection.